in our conversations up to now, it seems to me there have been two poles. One pole has been what you might call the apocalypse, that everything is converging towards some kind of extraordinary point of critical mass, and everything's going to go off in a big explosion, and it's anybody's guess what's going to happen afterwards. I mean, there are all kinds of scenarios for that. I mean, one of them we didn't mention, I don't know why we didn't, is that everybody's getting richer and richer. I mean, by the end of this century, everybody will be so rich that philanthropy will be totally out of date, and there'll be no point in having philanthropy anymore. Everybody, by my calculations, everybody on the planet will be earning an average of about $40,000 a year, will be making about $40,000 a year, men, women, and children. So, you know, as long as you've got an entirely rich world, rich people don't like wars because they don't have that many children, and they don't want to send their children off to war, and rich people don't have very many children anyway, so overpopulation is solved, and rich people take care of their medical problems, so you don't need any kind of, you don't need to worry about sort of medicine. The cocks of Hades are going to crow. We're all going to gather on the mountaintops, and it'll be, what was it? Somebody said the rapture of the nerds. You know, in a way, all we need to do is just sort of sit tight, wait around, and it's all going to happen, and it's all going to be absolutely amazing. And you know, what are we here for? And all of that messy, dark, complicated, conflicted, tragic, interesting narrative, that storyful, spiritually tormenting, sinful, weak, damaged stuff in the past is all going to go away. Well, here's my suggestion, that if this group actually has some kind of function, that is, if we are going to be concerned about a future in which it might be a good idea to have good intentions, in which it might be a good idea to work for people's benefit, it sort of means that, you know, all these wonderful things that are going to happen in the future are maybe not going to happen in the future. That maybe we're going to go on struggling. There's the apocalyptic side, and then there's we're going to go on muddling and struggling and so on with all of our institutional difficulties and all of our, you know, ideological problems and so on. And that's been the other side of this meeting. All right? I think that we probably are going to go on with all of that. My suggestion is something like this, and it's a very weird suggestion. Please try to get your heads around it. And it is that, in fact, the apocalyptic guys here are absolutely right. But it all happened about 120,000 years ago. It's already happened. It's already here. The first time there was an intelligent human being, the universe had in fact given birth to the singularity. Consciousness, inner being, inner soul, that extraordinary thing that we all have, all these sort of neat faces sitting around here looking out of these jelly eyes, you know, with this inner soul, you know. I mean, that was the apocalypse. That was the singularity. It's already here. We're on the other side of it. You know, we're inside the black hole. It's been Matrix ever since then. We've been in the Matrix. If you look at what human society is, I mean, the whole thing is it's a weird fantasy. In actual fact, life itself is a weird fantasy compared to, you know, solid things like, you know, crystalline matter. You know, asexually reproducing life makes a kind of sense, but I mean, any crystal would say, you mean you call merely being able to replicate your pattern somewhere else, you call that survival? Come on now, nonsense. And of course the replicating life would say of any sexually replicating organism, you mean to say that you claim that having your gene sequence cancerously infected by another gene sequence and shuffled up and messed with, that's survival? Come on now. And then, and more than that, and they say, and you mean that you actually, in order to be able to do the kind of thing that you do, you have to have programmed cell death, you have to have apoptosis? Come on now, that's not survival. I mean, that's a weird fantasy that you've got into. You've been playing too many computer games. I mean, essentially, sexual reproduction is a whole lot of asexual creatures playing a bunch of computer games. Wasting their time in cyberspace and getting into this virtual reality world that they live in. And then that virtual reality world comes up with a still weirder virtual reality world of social animals, in which, they don't spend their time reproducing, they spend their time having status battles and trading and doing politics and spreading their gigantic tail feathers, and sort of getting into threat behavior, and cheating on each other and trying to figure each other out and so on. Another fantasy game. And then one bunch of animals like that manages to fantastically accelerate that by means of language. And then language, is the weirdest fantasy game of all, especially when multiplied 1,000 times by print and so on. So we're already there, folks. We're already in Fantasyland. I mean, we've been in Fantasyland for about 120,000 years. And it turns out that Fantasyland, is a pretty rough, nasty, dirty place. I mean, how can I put it? What I'm saying is essentially, our problems are our own. We've made all of our trouble for ourselves. I mean, we act as if there were these terrible sort of barriers in nature to our happiness. But, if we were simply to be, happy with the length of our lifetime and enjoy this beautiful planet as it ought to be enjoyed, we could live for 20 years and, not mind dying and, we'd be perfectly happy. We make our troubles for ourselves, existentially, individually. And not only do we do that, we make troubles for ourselves collectively by having wars and nations and all of those fascinating, interesting things that we're now making computer games about. I mean, we like this stuff. We chose, rather than having the boredom of paradise, and this is what all the religious stories say, we chose, rather than having the boredom of paradise, to live this conflicted, difficult, dense, dark, slow, messy, viscous, obstacle-ridden path that we've taken. And we're going to go on with that path. I think, whatever powers we get, everybody else is going to have those powers too. I mean, Superman isn't Superman if everybody can fly and bullets bounce off everybody. And Milton was there already with the war in heaven, which the angels sort of smite each other with mighty swords, and the sword glides through their flesh and it reunites again. I mean, so what? Where's the kryptonite? You gotta have the kryptonite. And in fact, I think the human species invented every kind of kryptonite. It invented sin and self-knowledge and conflict and divorce and ecological problems and all of these these 1,000 shocks that mortal flesh is heir to. I mean, we invented this stuff for ourselves. And here we are. And we're such perverse beasts that we're going to go on inventing that stuff for ourselves, and we will like it. We do it because we want to. Which means then that if we talk about what the role of philanthropy might be, I mean, we're actually still going to go through. We're going to go on going through this messy, complicated, sinful, shame-ridden stuff that we've been going through already. So what does philanthropy amount to? What it comes down to, it seems to me, is that in all of this complicated, difficult soap opera of the human history, you know, maybe there are some really quite extraordinary things that are not just the techno paradise, that are something else. I mean, you know, things like, you know, heroism, things like beauty, things like, you know, what free people can do with their lives. In other words, you know, let's make our ambitions, in a sense, much more modest. Maybe people could do with a slightly longer lifetime. Although, I sure wouldn't want to be deprived of the immense dignity of death. You know, where would there be, you know, how could Mozart make a requiem without death? You know, death is the mother of beauty. You know, people need to be free to make these glorious fictions that they make. If they're living in conditions of serfdom and wretched ignorance and starvation and continuous pain, then they're not going to be quite as good at it. Although statistics seem to indicate that people who live in you know, pretty miserable conditions are just about as happy as people who, you know, live in Encinitas. You know, but you know, we can tweak stuff a little. You know, we can tweak it so that we can have experiences, or really sort of give experiences that are more subtle and that are more interesting and that have a kind of richness of irony and tragedy and comedy about them. A kind of density, a sort of density, a thickness of life. And, you know, no fear about, you know, the universe sort of dying after how many billion years it's going to, trillion years that it's going to go on. No fear about that. We're densifying time right now in the most extraordinary ways. We're living thousands and thousands of old years in every minute. We're living thousands and thousands of animal years and millions of plant years. You know, and every minute we're densifying it. And I think this is a large part of this. That if you like, there's a singularity that we are going into. This mining that this drilling that we are going to. And I think that's quite right. But of course, the deeper we go, the slower time passes. You know. We're making time. Milton in Paradise Lost understood this whole thing. His poem it's a parable of this whole mysterious process. And at the end of it, Adam and Eve go out into the world with a paradise within, surpassing far that which they'd left. So I'm not denying the apocalypse. I'm just saying it's already there. It's already happened. We're there. We're in the singularity. And what are we going to do about it? And that pushes us towards an emphasis on making things better in ways that are self-sufficient to themselves. And that means that, in a sense, all the other virtues, I mean, the virtue of truth is dependent on its correspondence with reality. The virtue of goodness is dependent on having somebody that you're doing good things for. There's a virtue of beauty which is just good in itself, just lovely and good in itself. And maybe, in a sense, that's the thing that we're going to have to cultivate, and that's going to have to be the ultimate goal of our philanthropy. well, I'm sorry about all of this. I just launched off into a different direction. But it was the only place I could go. Everybody else had said such brilliant things. And there was no possibility of summing it all up. So, well, here we are.